All right, so super excited about this session today. This is probably the culmination of about probably the full 20 years work, I would imagine. And even right from the moment that I learned NLP, so those of you that know that I had a phobia of public speaking, and then in my on my 7-day prep course, the last day we did the phobia cure and I walked out and I could talk for the first time in 27 years, like to other people properly. And but the other thing that it really did that made such a massive difference was I felt like I had a right to my own needs being met, if that makes sense. Like I had a right to be my own person for the first time. I'd always really felt like I was grateful for sort of any sort of love I was given. I didn't really feel like I had any worth. And at that 7 days, that NLP just helped me feel like I had a place. And as a result, the relationship that I was in at the time it was kind of, I see it on courses now when somebody comes on the course and they change a lot and then they kind of go back home and they're different and their partner's got to deal with that, because if you don't grow at the same sort of rough rate, that can cause massive issues. So I went home like this completely changed person after 7 days, and it was a lot for her to deal with. I can now look back at that through the eyes of everything that I now know and understand why that was such a difficult thing for him to deal with. But at the time, I just was like, let's work on this for 6 months. We'd been together 9 years. He was 14 years older than me. I didn't want to just walk away, and there was just nothing coming back the other way. There was no interest in working on it. Didn't want to talk to me, stonewalled me, and in the end, I saved myself and I left. But then, interestingly, had other relationships that I thought were great. Like I thought, wow, I'm really good at this relationship stuff now. And then I realized it was just that I wasn't being triggered by those people. And then as soon as Nick and I met, my God, the fireworks, because obviously we triggered each other like massively. And we had sort of about 3 days of total bliss in our relationship, like literally feeling like I feel the best I've ever felt in my life. I'm so happy. And then 3 days later, I managed to trigger him in kind of with a silly what was actually a joke, like a little bit of a joke, but not really. And that was it. And he kind of the walls came down, and we spent literally kind of 2 years just trying really, really hard to make it work. Um, and nobody could help us. That was really annoying because we knew the stuff, and yet we didn't have this framework that, we knew how to heal ourselves, but we didn't have the framework to be able to communicate. And when you've got somebody who's really shut down, they see everything as an attack, even trying to help them. And it was really, really hard. And it was only because I think Nick and I we loved each other as friends before we got together, which I always recommend. Uh, and it was only because of that that we knew, hang on, this is my person. This is the person that I loved before anything, happened. I know this isn't him. This is something else that he's dealing with, and I want to help him, and he same with me. So we managed to figure it out by ourselves, by hook or by crook. We've done so many different things. None of them was a complete solution. Some of it was good, some of it was terrible, and ultimately we figured it out by ourselves in the end. And since then, I have been incredibly passionate about just helping anybody who's asked for help with their relationship, because it's not just about, flowers and chocolates kind of love. This is about creating a friendship, a partnership for you to go through life with. So if you're in a relationship and there's bones of contention that are just really hard to deal with. That's affecting everything. That's affecting your children, it's affecting your career, it's affecting your joy, your happiness, your future, everything, and even your health. So this is one of the stats that I'll throw out now. And literally the John and Julie Gottman are pretty much the research people for relationships. So anything that they've written, I suggest you read as a starting point. But one of the things they've done is this research, and couples that have difficult relationships, literally their wounds heal 10% slower than couples that are in fulfilling relationships. So directly, your health is affected, and you know it's true because you feel it, right? So anyone who struggles in relationships, it is affecting us at a very, very deep level. So if you can have some really simple secrets to help understand what's going on through a framework that actually takes a lot of the emotion out of it, and you can start to see what's actually going on, the difference is immediate. And then you can pick through and do the work that you need to do. But firstly, understanding your dynamic and what is going on and where's it coming from and why is it happening. Almost like categorizing it out and saying, oh, okay, that's why this is happening. It will make an immediate difference in your relationship. So that's what I want to talk you through today. It's just some really big ideas, big kind of secrets that will make an immediate difference to you. If you're a coach, I'm wanting to give you a framework so that you can help clients of all kinds. Even Nick, when he's coaching athletes, it's always their relationships that they want help with, right? Even because that affects their performance as well. So it doesn't matter who you're working with, whether it's somebody who's got an issue with their boss, that's going to be affected by their relationship blueprint. Pretty much everything that we do, even friendships, even relationships with money, even relationships with your career, all come back down to your relationship blueprint. And therefore, it's just, for me, it's like that one topic that if you understand, you'll immediately either get better results for yourself, or as a coach, you'll just find you're better able to understand what's happening for clients and therefore apply a solution much more rapidly and succinctly. So that's what I want to do today. Just so you know, I think it's really important that when you're doing a webinar or workshop, that you, as you're going through it, you're asking yourself some questions. Okay, so one of the things I want you to consider is, you know me, I'm always trying to give away as much as I can. So hopefully today you get what you needed, and you will just sort of have enough aha moments to kind of go, oh my God, that is so helpful. Thank you very much. If you find that actually that has been helpful, then what I want you to consider doing is something I'm going to talk about at the end, which is something I love, which is called your dynamic diagnosis. It's very hard to say, so I won't repeat myself too much. But your dynamic diagnosis is a session that I do with couples where, and obviously you can do it by yourself if you're struggling to get into a relationship or stay in a relationship. But it's basically 2 45-minute sessions each, and then individual sessions, and a 2-hour session, like a deep dive looking at your relationship. And then you get a report at the end that says, right, this is what's going on for you. Like literally, this is what's going on for you, and this is what you need to do about it. And then you can do the follow-up by yourself, or I'll pinpoint resources like what books to read, and exercises to do to work through it. Or if you want to, you can come and do a 10-week course with me, which is where I'll take you through all of the stuff I'm going to do today, but in a much deeper and more practical way. And obviously you don't have to, but it would be amazing if you want to come and do that, because I can share so much more with you. 10 weeks of 2-hour sessions. It's pretty cool. And if you wait until the end, there are some discount codes I'm going to give you that I will not be giving to anybody outside of these calls. So I won't even do I put them in the recording? I might edit them out of the recording. So if you're watching live, stay to the end, or grab a person, grab a person who you know who's going to stay to the end, and let them give you the code. All right, just as an incentive to hang about with me. All right, and just ask any questions whatsoever. So that's what I want you to be considering as you go through, as well as all the aha moments, is would any of this be useful? If not, please just say what you need. And if I can give it to you, I will give it to you. All right, so I've already explained why work on your relationship, because it's so bloody important. One of the things to remember is your subconscious, as coaches, you know that is calling the shots most of the time. So we want to find out what's in there. And the relationship blueprint, there's more to it in there. There's quite a few little pieces in there that you want to understand, because those are calling the shots, like I said, with money, with your career, and other things that you might not think about in that way. The quality of our lives is determined by the quality of our relationship, literally our health. And the more people I meet, I work with a lot of millionaires and multi-millionaires. Haven't had my first billionaire yet, but what I know for sure is that the things that the lives that these people lead are amazing. From the outside, absolutely, amazing. But there's two things that where a life like that really makes no difference to you. And that's one, if your health isn't there. So vitality, you can live kind of with aches and pains getting out of bed. But if you have a health scare, if your health is in question, no amount of money or lifestyle or fortune in that way is beneficial to you. And the other one is if your relationship is shit. Because if it's not right, it doesn't matter. It literally just makes everything grey. It just makes everything difficult. So I've been on amazing holidays with Nick where I've slept on the bathroom floor because I did not want to talk to him or be near him at the beginning. And, luxurious surroundings. And I just cried for the whole time. So no amount of fortune is going to make that better if your relationships aren't in a good place. And for me, since so many relationships do fail, I think one of the most amazing achievements in life is to get to the end of your life and say, do you know what? I have really loved, I've really loved somebody, and I've tried to make somebody's life better. And I've worked with somebody to make them happy and then me happy. I think that's, what's better than that, as well as raising your children. But I think it's a really worthy goal. All right. Why listen to me? Because I've got a map. That's why. I've been through it. I've done it. I've really, and Nick, honestly, because he's not here, everything that we've done together. He has worked really, really hard as well. But we have created a map. I usually put the words to the map, and he does a lot of the coaching. But yeah, we've done it together, and we're really proud of what we've got. So we want to share that. Plus, I've done the coaching for 20 years, helping other people with their relationships. And again, like I said, the best achievement has been overcoming this issue in relationships. All right, so what are we going to cover today? What is making my relationship so fucked? Well, blueprints is the big answer. And then what we're going to cover today in varying amounts of depth, depending on your questions. Attachment style dynamics. Everybody's talking about attachment styles today. I want to give you my take on that. Incompatible conflict styles, because conflict is actually really important. It's just how you do it that matters. It's not the things that you fight about, it's how you fight about them. Unmet emotional needs, we know that's an absolute killer, that one. Childhood wounds and triggers, we're all very familiar with those. Poor communication skills. You don't have to be an expert in communication. You just have to have a few tools that you use and stop yourself and interrupt the pattern when you stop using them. And you're golden. Lack of emotional intimacy. I am absolutely floored by the number of couples who have been together for nearly 20 plus years, and they do not know each other. They do not know each other. They have no idea about their partner's inner world, and I find it really shocking. And obviously, that's something that isn't that difficult to do. Most of you are coaches, so I think for you that kind of is a given that you would want to know somebody's inner world. Um, but when you're coaching couples, it's staggering how many of them don't know each other or have labeled each other really early on, and then they treat each other as if they're still that label. Loss of trust. This is a whole big thing. So literally, we could do a course just on trust on its own. I have my own particular viewpoint on what trust is and how we get it wrong, and what we should actually be looking at rather than do you trust your partner? We should be looking at something else. Because if you've done values work, you know that you can trust someone to adhere to their values. And therefore, it's not about just having blind faith in somebody. It's about trusting that, knowing what somebody's values are, what they would and wouldn't do, and trusting yourself almost in that situation, that you are lovable, that you are worthy. That's more important conversation. Lack of clarity. So, if you're not doing it for each other anymore, then that isn't that difficult to deal with either. Like, really, it feels like it at the time, but there's ways to get back to each other. And again, we're all familiar with sort of NLP interventions where you can change how you feel pretty quickly about things. So relationships is no different. There might be a few obstacles in the way, but ultimately, if you've been into each other at one point, you can be into each other again. Unresolved conflicts or hurts, the lack of repair is staggering. So again, brushing shit under the rug. But where does it live? It's going to live under the rug. It's not going to go anywhere. You might, forgive and forget. But learning how to repair is vital. So learning how to sort of resolve some of the past hurts that people carry with them, really, really important. The big thing to remember is we marry our unfinished business. So it isn't your fault why you're in the relationships that you're in, why your partner or partners in the past have been the way that they are. We're talking blueprints. This is stuff that is formed before the age of 3, and it is entirely subconscious and very hard to consciously navigate. So as much as you can have compassion for yourself around this, please do, because it is not your fault. But it can be your responsibility to fix it, okay? Ideally. So naturally, as I've kind of gone through those things, communication skills falls out, your emotional intimacy comes up. The biggest impact that you can have on a relationship is the individual therapeutic coaching. So that's like, if one partner is really jealous, then I like to think, well, first of all, let's check whether they're actually just really intuitive and actually right. But if they know for a fact that they just don't trust that anybody would love them, blah, 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 then that's an individual therapy session, an individual therapeutic coaching session they need to have to be able to feel worthy of love and so on. So that's going to be the biggest difference. Polarity exercises, very easy. And the couples breakthrough coaching, which I really love. I'm the middle child. Love a bit of mediation. Love a bit about sitting on the fence, seeing both sides. That's my bag. So really happy to sit with a couple and really help them figure out what's going on one-to-one. I think it's amazing. It's like working with somebody one-to-one is like trying to cut someone's hair without being able to see the back of it. You're like kind of relying on them to tell you what the back of their head looks like. When you've got a couple sitting there and one of them saying something, the other one jumps in and says, that's not true. That's not what you do at all. And then when you're in that session individually, you have nothing to kind of, you can't tell them that that's not true. You can't challenge them. You just take them on face value. So I love the couples coaching because if you want feedback on yourself, grab another person and live with them and they'll give it to you. So All right, so how to make the most of this session. I am going to go fast, but I do want you to ask questions. Oh, there is a question already. The 10-week course, basically the 10-week course, think of it more as a kind of here's everything that you need to know about relationships, whether you're a coach or an individual, so, or a couple. So you could go through it as a couple, you could go through it as a coach, and you're like, right, I just want to understand, because trust me, you want to understand your own shit if you're going to try and sit there and help other people, because it will trigger the shit out of you if you're not sorted out in that area. I have clients even now where I'm leaving the session, I'm going straight to do some work on myself because something's come up that, that's triggered me, from their behavior, and it's like, oh, there's one I haven't done before. So you want to make sure that your own stuff is in the right place. So yeah, do it for yourself. Watch the recordings back to then learn how to do it with other people is my recommendation. And if you're single as well, it will be exactly the same information that you need. And you won't get you won't get the slides from today. You might get a selection from today, but you'll get the recording, which will have the slides that we've covered. The slides are from the 10-week course for today, so obviously we won't go through all 56. And there's a lot more on the course as well. So you're going to want to listen back to the recording. Certain of the explanations, just think of it as layers. It takes a while to really understand the attachment styles and things like that. If you get any aha moments, write those down. Do any of the exercises now or later. Notice any limiting beliefs that pop up. If you feel really challenged by something, then yeah, that's a good thing. So make a note of that, or pop it in the chat. All right. So blueprints, where do they come from? So how many of you understand what I mean when I talk about relationship blueprints? Good. Okay, good. So those of you who are familiar with the NLP, sorry for so much text on the slide, those are familiar with NLP, when we talk about our timeline work at the end of the NLP, we talk about Massey's imprint periods and 0 to 7 being this really important stage where you're sort of downloading how to be a human from the people that are around you. But one of the things that you're really downloading is relationships between partners, relationships between parents and children, relationships between friends, relationships with money. You are downloading everything that you need to be able to grow up and live a life. And ultimately, what that environment was for you is in your subconscious. Now, you might have made certain decisions as a little child, like, I'm never going to be like that, which is great, that'll be in there, but it's still in there. So our blueprint contains the programs for parenting. In counselling, they call them, or psychotherapy, they would call it parenting tapes. You've got these recordings, and you know that they're there because you'll hear yourself saying things when you get older to a certain age that you're like, oh my God, that's what my mum would say. And you know that they're in there. Ultimately, it's really important that, so you think about what is successful parenting. What would you want to download, right? If you were nature and you were saying, look, let's say that lioness there, gets killed, and her lion cubs need to grow up by themselves. What would you hope that they've downloaded by the time she goes? Right, we'd hope that they would download, how to find a mate, how to raise cubs and so on, how to feed themselves. So what is successful parenting is anything that allowed your genes to survive, your genetic information. So if that lioness spent her whole time, mauling her cubs, but they survived, those cubs would naturally have, kind of downloaded that that's how you raise cubs. Why would they question that? If they survived and that's the parenting, they would naturally repeat that parenting. Makes sense to do that, because nature doesn't know whether that was a useful part of why they survived. Might have been. So it doesn't take any chances. It just says, well, just repeat the process with your own children. So it goes in and it doesn't question whether that was a nice childhood for you. So in in certain tribes, for example, if they want their children to grow up as warriors and aggressive, then they deny them care, right? So they deny them love and comfort, right? Because it makes, warriors. It creates aggressive, warriors. And then how are those warriors going to treat their own children? They're going to suddenly read some parenting book in nature somewhere that's fell off a tree. It's it's a natural thing, but obviously we are in the the 21st century, so we don't have to be governed by it, but you have to know that it's in there. So if you've had a difficult or challenging upbringing, it doesn't mean to say that you're going to treat your children in a horrible way. It just means that you have responded to your childhood in a particular way that may make being the kind of parent that you want to be, or being the kind of partner that you want to be, challenging at times. And especially if, for example, let's say one of the cubs grows up and all it meets is lovely, lovely lions that are really soft and gentle. They'll manage, they'll cope, but the moment that it meets, but it might not actually find those mates attractive. But let's say it finds a lion that's quite vicious and aggressive. All of a sudden, the blueprint might light up and say, "Oh, this one's a keeper." Like get really big feelings and say, "Yeah, I want to imprint on you. I want to keep you." Even though you're not as loving and comfortable as the other ones. So our blueprint fucks us over so many times if you don't have a positive one. Because how many of you have fallen for someone that you absolutely know in your conscious mind, absolute no? Yeah, at least once maybe in your life. And even if you've fallen for someone that you thought was great, when they turned bad, did you leave straight away? Did you get really upset if you were left by somebody who treated you really badly? Did you get really upset about it? Like, oh, why have they gone? Maybe I could get them back. Yeah. And if you didn't do that, then you have a different attachment style. Okay. But it's not a conscious thing. It's a big neurological thing. And when you get dysregulated because of your attachment style being provoked, it's really hard to regulate that. Okay. Or use the rational side of your brain. So, what is successful parenting? It means you survived with enough tools to feed yourself and find a mate. Nature doesn't care how it made you feel. If you survived, it counts as a win. It's in there and you've got access to it if you need it. Okay. But yes, usually your blueprint will light up inside your body like a Christmas tree when you meet someone who is familiar. And aha moment number one, if you meet somebody who you've only just met and you feel head over heels in love with, that is a massive red flag. And that has been linked more to trauma and and anxiety than excitement. You cannot love somebody that you just met. You can't. Like, if you believe in soulmates, fine, let's take that out of the equation. But that feeling of in love, that's attachment styles, baby. That's blueprint. And if you've had the loveliest caregivers growing up, that's a win. That's a win. That's great. You just met somebody who's familiar. That's great. But if you didn't, if there were times that you felt invalidated and not, that you didn't have your feelings cared about, that you had over responsibility, that you didn't feel worthy, then yeah, red flag. Yeah. Actually, secure relationships tend to be a little bit dull. So if you watch TV, I was thinking about this the other day, if you watch TV, you would think that all relationships are like that, like on TV. If you watch it once you've understood attachment styles, you realise how effed up all the relationships on TV are. Like, how many stupid romance things end up, like romantic comedies or whatever, end up because of a lack of communication. You know, they just tell the person how they feel. So like Darcy, Mr. Darcy, the most classic Pride and Prejudice. Everybody's talking about their feelings, and so of course they're all making it up in their head what everybody's thinking and meaning. That is not a healthy relationship, but it's drama and everyone loves it. So we're suckers for it. It's you'll see you'll take your favourite films now. Dirty Dancing, another one. Right, I'm going to give you all these back once we've done attachment styles. You can tell me how effed up their attachment styles are on each film and why they were so good. So yeah, we all want, you know, the love we never had. That's a big one. You know, the big feelings, and if it's big, it's old. So where's that going to come from? So yes, but if you know it, you can harness it. There's nothing wrong with the big feelings. Let me just say, I'm a big sucker for the drama, you know, on the films as well. But they're not necessarily always healthy relationships on the films. There we go. Another really, 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 really important, a really, really important thing to remember, especially when you're working with individuals, with couples. Relationships are a dynamic, and this is not open to debate. this is backed by multiple different kinds of research. When we are in a relationship with somebody, it is so easy to think it's the other person that's a dick. And sometimes they are being a dick. But what we don't tend to see is how we triggered them into being a dick to us. Now, that doesn't mean it's yours to blame, obviously. Bad behavior is bad behavior. But you can't say it's all them if you're part of it. Because there needs to be you to stop, you to shift something in you that stops triggering. I mean, if they're a dick, you just don't hang out with them, right? So if you've got toxic, you know, somebody who's toxic to you, don't hang out with them. But if you're stuck with them, then it's probably worth looking at, how am I resonating with this? How do I attract dicks into my life all the time? Why is my boss the same kind of dick as I date? You know, why do people treat me like this? At some point, you have to think, is it me? And it's not that you deserve it. It's not that you go out of your way looking for it. But if you resonate with it, if you have the script for it, then the chances are it will provoke something in somebody else. So I had a really great example of this where, in a work context as well lately, where a boss comes to me to complain about one of the employees. And this is really typical in a team. They'll have, 90% of people they get on well with, but it's just like 1 out of 10, or 10 out of 100 people they really struggle with. And they get really, really triggered by this, this one type of person. And for example, if it's somebody who's massively independent, work their way up, nobody helps me, I have to figure this out by myself. And then they end up with somebody who's quite needy on their team, who needs a lot of help, who needs a lot of support and guidance. The irritation that comes from having to deal with someone who you would never be allowed to be is immense. Is it the person who's needy? Is it their fault? No, obviously not. But you could then equally say, is it the boss's fault that they find that really annoying? Yeah. It's not their fault. It's a dynamic. So if the person who was more, anxious and needy came to me and said, I don't understand why I can't get any help from anybody. It's like, does this happen a lot? Is this a big thing? Is it a repeated pattern or a one-off? Why how's this person treating you so badly? Probably it's old, and it's probably come up before, and probably there's a script for it in the blueprint somewhere. Yeah. So a parent or a teacher, where they're you can't say one started it. So the very fact that you've got this stoic, independent, fierce leader triggers an additional kind of anxiety and need in the individual, because it's from the past. Once you start dealing with the triggers and take them away, weirdly enough, everybody starts managing better. So it's only when you see how when one person shifts, the other person immediately changes without having ever had a discussion with them, that you realize that it really is a very sort of silent dynamic going on. And I had a situation the other day where I'd had a couple, and I'd done individual therapeutic coaching with the one partner, and then they'd gone on holiday for a couple of weeks. And when they came back, when she came back from the holiday, they did a couple session, and the husband sits there and he goes, to be honest, the last, since she's been back, I think because she had a couple of weeks away and she's rested and everything, she's been unrecognizable. It's like she's got her old mojo back. She's so much easier to deal with now. We haven't had any of the sort of normal rows that we've had. Now, of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, yeah, it could be that she's had 2 weeks away, but she's also been away lots of times before and nothing's changed. But the one thing that did change before she went away was a massive re-imprint on one of her biggest triggers. So yes, she comes home and suddenly she's not picking up on the cues as much. She's not, rising to the bait. She's not just not reacting in the same way. So this is normal when you work on this, that you don't always have to work with the other person, especially if it's a boss or even a child. If you're triggered by your own children, if you don't expect them to change, you deal with your triggers, and then they weirdly shift. So relationships are feedback loops. It is just, and that's, the Gottmans have sort of proved that in the lab, that that's the case. Attachment styles interact, which we'll look at in a second, and systems theory says that yes, they function as a system. And obviously we've got the good old Pygmalion effect, or the Gollum effect as well, which is where the literal expectations and self-fulfilling prophecy, you end up kind of, without realizing, provoking behavior or I think sometimes it's just distorting it with your own label for that person. So once you've labeled someone, that's how they're gonna behave now until you relabel them. So that's another important technique. They are a dynamic. It is never just one person. You can, even if the other person's a dick, you have the power to shift how you experience their dickness. Okay, so do that before you go out there expecting the whole world to shift. So much easier to start with you and see how it goes. And then obviously you can always not be with them if they're really toxic. Okay. Okay, who knows much about attachment styles? It's something now everyone's talking about attachment styles now. Good. All right. Who doesn't know anything about attachment styles? Do you know your own attachment style? Who knows their own attachment style? Ooh, excellent. Okay. Not everyone. All right. So this is I'm going to give you the bulby ones. So we just got 4. We've got secure, dismissive avoidant, anxious preoccupied, fearful avoidant. I'm just going to call dismissive and anxious, or avoidant, probably. Yeah, it's called dismissive avoidant, anxious preoccupied, fearful avoidant. All right. In the first year and then up to 3 years, our mothers, I would say mother is usually the main caregiver for most people. So in that first year, we're learning about the world and whether it's safe. We're learning about whether this is a safe universe, whether I'm warm, whether I'm loved, whether I'm fed, whether when I cry somebody picks me up, when I fall down, does somebody pick me up? If I make a frowny face, does somebody make a frowny face to show me that they understand that I'm angry? Does somebody try to soothe me? Does somebody get upset when I have emotions? Or can they regulate my emotions? Does my dysregulation dysregulate other people? These are a lot of questions that ultimately create our neurology in relationships. I use that term because we can get into the cerebral thing about patterns. Actually, honestly, it's our neurology that gets dysregulated when we're in bad relationships or when we're struggling in relationships, which is why it's so difficult to deal with. And then we try to grown-upatize it with logic and things, and then can't figure out what's going on and just blame the other person instead of realizing that it's something is dysregulating us. So a secure attachment is basically a child who every time they, 30% of the time, the bar is pretty low, 30 to 50% of the time when they've cried, somebody's nurtured them, somebody's mirrored their emotions, they've not tried to sort of shut up, stop being silly, they've not been invalidated, they've been allowed to have their feelings, and somebody has regulated their their nervous system when they've been upset. And their parents probably have secure attachment styles, or at least have worked through it enough to be there for their children. Then you've got the and by the way, as I'm going through, kind of think, okay, do I know anyone like that? Somebody gave me a statistic the other day, it's about 50% of people are secure. I absolutely refute that. I mean, I know I'm biased because I don't see that many like secure relationships, but it cannot be. It just can't be 50% because that's just not how, it's not possible. I would say 20 to 30% maximum of people have secure attachment styles. And it's obviously a spectrum here. Then we've got the dismissive avoidant. So a dismissive avoidant is somebody who is likely to be fairly unemotional. And if they do go to emotions, it's probably more in the irritation, anger, like pushing away emotions, sort of distancing emotions, like go away, defensive emotions. They're most likely the kinds of kids that were encouraged to be independent and sort of rewarded for being good and quiet. The household itself may have been very quiet, sort of not emotional. We don't do emotions. They don't see anybody dealing with emotions. The emotions are very much kind of like, oh my God, you're not going to get care if you act like that. Nobody will like you if you're angry. So the child learns to sort of suppress their emotions in order to get care. They still feel anxious. They still want to have relationships, but they're overwhelmed if somebody kind of loves on them because it's so unfamiliar and it feels like I don't know how to cope with that. And another type of dismissive avoidant that you might come across is the parentified child. And so this is a child who is probably they could have a very emotional parent, and therefore they dampen their own emotions to stop the parent getting upset. Yeah. So even this morning, without really thinking about it, Rocky said something horrible to what's my other child's name? River. he said something to her, and I was just like, trying to deal with Dexy, trying to get a coffee and everything else. And I said, oh, babes, I just need you to be really nice to her today, please. Because they fight all the time, which is really normal, by the way, really normal. But if you've grown up in a household where it was horrid and toxic, it doesn't feel normal, but it's really healthy. So I just, without really thinking about it, I said, I just really need you to be nice to her today. But think about it, if that was how I spoke to him all the time, I was like, please don't have that emotion. It's really inconvenient for mummy. And I'm really not in the mood for your antics today. So could you just not? Eventually, the child kind of goes, okay, well, if I'm going to get fed here, if I'm going to get validation, I've got to be good and I've got to be quiet and not a problem. And I can't emote and express myself the way I want to. So I'll just put a lid on it. It can also be when they grow up that they do tend to resonate towards very emotional partners where they feel the burden of responsibility for those partners. and therefore it's very one-sided relationship. So you end up with the kind of the person that has feelings and the person who doesn't have feelings, and it's just as well because there wouldn't be any room for anybody else's feelings even if they did. So the dismissive avoidant is always kind of trying to leave the relationship to get their needs met, and by needs I mean the kind of safety and relaxation. And the closest I can get to giving you an analogy for the dismissive avoidant is either someone who's just like, whoa, like that is a lot to deal with. So I'm just going to be over here, like having alone time. And the other one, which is the kind of, think about how a newborn, you know, how a new mum might feel. She loves this creature so much, but it's all about giving. It's all about giving. And therefore, to meet her own needs, it's like, oh, can you take over for a minute? 'Cause I just have to get out of here for a minute and decompress. And some dismissive avoidants feel a little bit like that. So they feel like they don't exist as a real person in the relationship. They exist to kind of meet the other person's needs. And then to get their needs met, they need alone time. And it's kind of when the other partner's out of the house, they can just be like, oh, that's so nice. No burden, no requests. I don't have to worry about somebody else and just switch off. So it's not like then they have a big emotional thing. They're just, oh, it's so quiet. So the dismissive avoidant is just someone who has been praised for being independent, quiet, and not having big emotional inner world. Doesn't mean so they don't have it, but they repress it. And it's been shown they actively do repress. So they have the same need for emotional connection and intimacy, but they tend to repress it to not have to risk being shouted at or risk being rejected. Anybody think they're dismissive avoidant? Yeah, Rosie, that resonates. Yeah. Yeah, there are quizzes. Yeah. And there's loads of different ones as well. So you might come out sort of slightly different on the spectrum, depending on whether they ask about your mum, dad, friends, and current partner, or just your current partner, because you can have different reactions to different partners, of course. So your actual style will depend on a mix of all of those experiences, a mix of caregivers, rather than just the person that you're with right now or have been. So dismissive avoidant. Any questions about the dismissive for now? Yeah, we know what you are. Questions? Yeah, Amanda?
Just this is a wild card here. If you've got somebody who is, if we go back to our human design, and one of their environments is caves, you know, because I like my own space, is that sort of muddying the water a little bit?
Yeah, because it's about whether you lean into a relationship or you don't. So when we look at anxious, preoccupied, it will make more sense, because when you're dysregulated, do you reach for another person or do you run to your cave? Now, a dismissive avoidant is more likely to want to be alone to regulate, because that's their experience growing up, is that it's not going to help leaning towards somebody else. That's going to be either met with suppression or rejection, so or just isolation. So they would tend to have to kind of go to a cave to depress. Anxious, preoccupied, when we're going to look at later, is someone who actively leans in to get regulated. They need the other person to regulate them and reassure them. They feel very dysregulated alone. So if you are, and then there's the fearful avoidant, which we need to cover as well, because this is what's tricky about it, because it's a spectrum. So you're obviously going to have different things. But the dismissive avoidant would love a cave, obviously. The anxious preoccupied can like a cave, but it's a very different thing to going there. I'm a manifestor. I love being on my own, but not when I need comfort, reassurance. Yeah, that's when I want to lean into a relationship to get that. I want emotional connection to regulate Like if I, if I, with all this stuff that's been happening in the last week or so, there's a bunch of other stuff as well. I wanted Nick there. Like I want him around, and I've had to be really aware of the fact that he might need to actually decompress because that's his base attachment style. So we're obviously recovering, but I know that I lean in, and he tends to do that really, really well. But then for him, he might need to decompress in a cave with the light off, just quietly, but then come back. And respecting that is really important, because when we look at anxious preoccupied, they would take their partner needing to go and be by themselves as utter rejection. So the anxious preoccupied, and again, there is a spectrum here, and it's a huge spectrum. But if you are more anxious preoccupied, what it means is, the pure anxious preoccupied is a child who's really struggled to get their needs met, possibly because they had a dismissive avoidant parent, possibly, or just a parent that was preoccupied with their own stuff. But ultimately, it's like I need to shout really loudly to get seen. I need you to regulate me. I need reassurance, and I'm not going to stop until I get it. And I don't trust that you're coming back either. So when you leave and you go to the shops, I don't trust that you're not going to meet somebody else at the shops and never come back. It is like somebody who has if you've done meta programs in NLP, it's like they need to be consistently reassured. There's sometimes there's an end point where it's like, okay, you've convinced me for 3 years. I'm now convinced that you love me. But with anxious preoccupied, pure anxious preoccupied, you're never convinced. You need constant reassurance that when someone leaves, they're coming back. And again, you can be excessively, really needy, or you can just feel it and know that you feel it and not say anything. But most of the time, anxious preoccupied have to say something. There's not it's total dysregulation when their partner isn't fully present and reassuring of them. So if an anxious preoccupied grown up is with a dismissive avoidant in a relationship, and the dismissive avoidant is like, decompress, I need to get out of here, I need to go play snooker, or I need to go, quiet place in my cave. The anxious preoccupied is like, what have I done something? Why have you not? Why do you need to go away? What have I done wrong? Who are you seeing? Why do you want to do that? Is it because you enjoy that and love that more than me? Because that's how it feels. Now that feels childish, because it is. That's your caregiver, 0 to 3, not validating enough of your emotions, and so you don't ever get that reassurance that, mummy's coming back or daddy's coming back. So anxious preoccupied, they never stop chasing. And the only time an anxious preoccupied ever stops chasing is when they reach something called anxious burnout, where they're just so tired of trying to get what they need from the other person. They end up kind of not caring anymore. But that's kind of, then they're in danger then of kind of grieving the relationship and leaving, which was always my thing. Anyone think they're more anxious? Oh yeah, dogs definitely are on that spectrum, the anxious preoccupied. Cats very much more dismissive avoidant. It's always interesting when someone says they're a dog person or a cat person. The parentified the parentified children, where they've been burdened with a grown-up's emotions, often find that they get very upset about the extra burden of a pet. Right, because they're like, oh, now I've got to feel something else to feel guilty about. Whereas the dismissive avoidance just, they might find them a bit needy, but they love the fact that they'll follow me about everywhere. Fearful avoidant it can hide in plain sight. This is the biggest spectrum in terms of where you'll see the biggest swing of emotion and dysregulation. Ultimately, fearful avoidant is, let's imagine I'm desperate for love and attention and I'm 3. And in fact, in my own life, my mum had another baby when I was 2, and now that's almost River's age, and I think, God, imagine, like, she's she needs so much at this age. But imagine going back to the beginning, having a baby while she's still so needy. I can understand where my attachment style came from. So even if my mum had done the best job that she possibly could in the whole world, she still wouldn't have been able to meet my needs 30 to 50% of the time, right? With a new baby and an older child and an unhelpful husband. That would have been hard. So, but imagine if the child needs regulation. So 2-year-old goes up to mummy and they're crying, I need something. Mum is exhausted from caring for the newborn and she's just listening to them and eventually she's like, go away, like, God. And the child literally shuts down. Like, it was such a shock and such a scare that they realized in that kind of hormonal series of moments, if I pursue this relationship, I will end up more hurt. So I'll just shut down. So fearful avoidance are kind of, they want the relationship. So they often are in relationships, but they shut down when they get hurt or fear rejection. And they can be quiet about it and they can be annoying about it. So they can be quite rude and aggressive about it as well. Because one of the reactions to, like, go away would be, shut up, I don't love you anymore, and kind of protest that experience, but then walk off. I don't love you anymore, mummy. Yeah. So that would be the, fine, I'm going to shut down and sulk and I'm not going to talk to you. But then imagine mummy said, well, I'm going out to the shops, I'm going to leave you behind. I'm not coming. Okay, well, bye then. So the push-pull dynamic for a fearful avoidant is someone whose emotions have often been back and forth, back and forth. The fearful avoidant is, I think Pink talks about it, the go away, come back in that song. Leave me alone, I'm lonely, right? That's the massive fearful avoidant anthem, which is, like, oh, I hate you, but then if they try to leave, no, I'm sorry, come back, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And this makes the greatest film dramas. So you'll see a lot of this in the films because everybody loves a bit of drama. Susan, come on.
Jess, is it possible to have more than one attachment style?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
But I'd caveat that to say, yes, it is. It depends on what you're being triggered into, because you can have scripts in your blueprint for mum, dad, caregivers, brothers, sisters. So you can get triggered into kind of the different script that you would have run with the similar type of person. So if you meet somebody, like if I meet somebody like my mum, whether it's a man or a woman, I have one sort of script that that plays in, whereas if I meet somebody like my dad, a different script tends to want to play. What I would look at first, if you feel like you have two, would be that you're fearful avoidant, and that as long as you're not being triggered, you're happy as Larry, but the moment that you're triggered, something happens. So obviously I can answer more specific questions, but yes is the answer to that one. You can.
Okay, thanks.
Similar to that, Jess, I feel like I resonate with all four of them. In the same relationship, not even in different ones.
Right.
I'm all of these, just at different times.
At different times with different triggers. Yes, exactly. So therefore, probably fearful avoidant then, because we all crave co-regulation. That's not something. As you're a human being, unless you've been utterly traumatized and shut down entirely, in which case you probably wouldn't want to be in a relationship. Then you want to co-regulate. There is sort of this instinct that you want to be in a relationship. So it's then just going to be how you weather that, what is ultimately quite a tricky situation. So if who you're with also has a fearful avoidant attachment style, And there might be days when you're feeling great and everything's hunky-dory and you're like, I think we're really secure. I think this is working really well. And then other days when they're a little bit moody or something, and you're a little bit moody and you're both ready to shut down, yeah, then you can kind of feel like you're more fearful of it. And then on another day, you're kind of really needing that regulation and they're a little bit more shut downy. So it's going to, exacerbate your anxious attachment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
say if there's a flux, then you're probably fearful avoidant. In my experience, it is the most common one. The anxious to meet someone who will never give up, the anxious preoccupied. I've met one recently, and my God, she literally, she's been treated so badly, and yet when I said, okay, I did the kidney test, because there's loads of questions to ask, which I will ask you as well. One of them is the kidney test, which is if you to check whether you are with the right person in life, depending on what your standards are for relationships. One question to ask is, let's say you take the person that you care most about in the world other than your partner, and you imagine if that person that you love most in the world needed a kidney, right? Would you give that person a kidney? Are you the sort of person that would? Well, obviously, when I think about the person I love most in the world after, not kids, take the kids out of it. Most in the world after Nick, if they needed a kidney, of course I would give them a kidney. But dilemma, what if your partner needs one at the same time? You've only got one. Now, when you're with the right person, ultimately, selfishly, you kind of do err on the fact that you want your partner to have it. But here's when you know that they're the right person. If they're the right person, what do they want you to do with the kidney? Any ideas?
They'd probably want you to keep it because they'd be worried about you.
They'd want you to keep it, or
give it to the kids.
Well, if the kids, I'd take the kids out of it. If it was a person you love most in the world other than your partner, they'd want you to give it to them because they know how much that person means to you.
Oh, the other person.
Yeah. And that's how you know that somebody loves you for you and they want you to be happy. Does that make sense? So you can have this great relationship with somebody, but when they love you and they know that somebody you love is also in pain, they would want you to look after them, and they would help you to do that. So one of the ways, and that's just one way, that may not be your way, you might have different values, and yes, obviously they'd want you to keep the kidney so you could be well. But when I asked this lady, I was like, she hasn't been with him a really long time either, and that's another red flag. If you feel these feelings and you've not really been together a long time. And I said about the kidney, would you want him to have it or, this other person? And she was like, no, I'd want him to have it, her partner. Despite everything they've been through, she would want him to have it. Now that's a really, even though she's really struggling to leave a toxic relationship. So another way that you can tell somebody is anxious, preoccupied is because they just won't leave. They stay way longer at jobs, despite complaining about the treatment that they're receiving. They stay way longer in relationships. They find it really hard to walk away. So especially if somebody is saying, no, stay, I love you. That feels, and this is true because you can have an otherwise really independent person, like a strong person, flawed by their attachment style, because the attachment style comes from neurologically an age where you couldn't have walked away. So the idea of walking away at age 1 because you're not getting your emotional needs met is absolute suicide. And it feels a similar level of ridiculousness as an adult to walk away from someone you're anxiously attached to, because you desperate for regulation, you're desperate, no, they will come back, they will at some point, maybe if I'm just good enough. You see a lot of people pleasing behavior in this one, and this comes back down to the wounds as well, which we'll get to. But an anxious attached wound is I'm not good enough, And therefore, I just need to get good enough. I just need to do everything right, and I just won't do anything wrong. And then they will love me, won't they? They'll come back. Because they told me not to do this, I won't do it. I'll do everything right. But they can't help themselves. So even if they, even if their partner says, "Well, stop being angry at me," okay, and they can't because they're dysregulated. So but they try. They will often say, "I'm a brilliant in relationships. I do this for you. I do that for you. We're doing all these things for you." They've not been asked to do those things, but that's the I'm not good enough, so I've got to get good enough and be good enough is the wound. Whereas the dismissive avoidant has much more likely a wound where nothing I do is ever going to please you. There's something wrong with me. Like, I'm just not good at relationships. No, I just can never please anybody. So what's the point? So they don't necessarily feel like a lot of effort needs to be made, because what's the point? Like, nothing I do is ever going to please you, or it's never going to be enough. So what's the point? And
So
that's a
is-
childhood wound, yeah.
Is the fearful avoidant then goes between both of those?
Yeah, the fearful avoidant is either I'm not good enough and therefore I need to do loads and loads of stuff, but when it doesn't work, I hate you, go away. Yeah. Or sulk until you provoke it again, and then I'm like, I'm sorry. Or it's the dismissive, well, why should I bother? Nothing I do is ever good enough. And then, well, I'm gonna leave you then. No, don't.
Yeah, okay.
No, we can talk about it. And what we see, and again, these are very sort of, I tend to see quite extreme examples, but dismissive avoidance are the sorts of people, and you know it's true if it's you. You will often say what you need to say in the moment just to shut them up, because you don't want to have to deal with it. So you will often say, yeah, no, you're right, absolutely. Yeah, we should talk about it. Yeah, no, of course. And then quite often say it and then do what you want anyway. Just lie. Lying is obviously quite extreme, but not telling the truth sometimes because you just don't want to hear it is classic dismissive avoidant. They're the sort of like, but it's better to beg forgiveness than to ask permission sort of style. Yeah, anxious, preoccupied, they can be self-righteous, they can be aggressive. Although they are needy, it doesn't mean to say that they are kind. I definitely was pretty awful to Nick in our relationship, because I was so angry that he wasn't meeting my needs. It was like, although I later realised I was more fearful avoidant, because there was a lot of shut down. Most of the time I presented at the beginning as anxious, preoccupied. I would have chased him to the end of the earth to get my needs met. And he just kept running. And then he would turn around and promise me things and then keep running and not mean any of them, but just to shut me up. So, I've seen, and the rage at him, we call it protest behavior, which helps. So any of you that are like, when your partner doesn't meet your needs, if they're selfish, if they're inconsiderate, if they are rejecting you, or you feel like they're rejecting you, and your response is anger or attention seeking or manipulation or blackmail or threats or whatever, that's all protest behavior, and it is not your fault. You cannot help that. Like, until you've done the therapy on it, you cannot help it. It is literally despair that's coming out in those moments where you feel like you're going to get left or abandoned. So, if you've got a partner who acts like that around you, like, where have you been? You said you were going to be home at 5, and now it's like 5:05, and you didn't even call. I guess this is how we're going to deal with this then. Anything like that, they are so dysregulated that it is not their fault that they're dysregulated. It is their responsibility to do something about it, yes. But the fact that they're like it is not within their control. Even if they promise you it is, it's not. Which is why when you get somebody who's in a domestic violence situation, often the fearful avoidant is the aggressor, but can also be the anxious as well, just with massive protest behaviour that goes too far. And the toxicity there is the sorry. The For example, the anxious and the dismissive find each other and fall in love every time. It is just the most common connection. I'll explain why in a second. But when you get that, imagine you feel worthless, and this person who you think is amazing because they're so strong and they're so stoic and they're so amazing mistreats you, and you've got a not good enough wound, so you assume it's something you've done wrong, and if you could just be good enough, they would love you. And then imagine that when they hit you or they then abuse you and then they're sorry, imagine the flood of significance that you would get when they're begging forgiveness and they come back to you. Like, that's why it's so fucked up. Like, in that particular, and that's why people can't leave, because they're anxious attached to their abuser. So again, not their fault. You can't talk your way out of that. You can't rationalize your way out of an abusive relationship. It is in your neurology to be there. So you have to heal it out. Yeah. How many of you have got a friend where you're like, just leave? For God's sake, I'm sick of hearing it. Just bloody leave. They can't. They can't. And here's a good question, though, to help wake them up to it as well, which is, if somebody who's anxious attached, let's say, and is complaining that the person isn't meeting their needs, they've never met their needs, like it's constant complaining, but they won't leave. Ask them, do you, first of all, do you like, let's say him, let's be sexist, do you like him? And they might be like, well, yeah, obviously. Like, would this person be a friend? If you've never, gone on a date, with this person and their behaviour and the way they treat you, would you keep them as a friend? Now, quite often that's really hard for people to say yes to, let's face it. If they've been complaining about how they've been treated, no, they wouldn't be a friend. So they might lie and say, yeah, of course they would. And then you say, okay, do you love this person? Do you love who they are? Do you want them to be happy? And again, they might struggle to answer it. But when you say, or are you just attached to them? Like, if there's nothing that you really like about them and they wouldn't be your friend, and you love them because they're your partner, not because you actually think they're a really lovely person, worthy of your time and attention, the only answer left is because you're attached to them. Yeah, that's it. So being attached to somebody is a reason why lots of people stay. And especially when you say, if you imagine leaving, what happens? Now, if they say something like, I'd really miss them. Yeah, I wouldn't, my life wouldn't be as good without them there. Great. Okay, there's hope there. If it's, I don't want to be on my own. I'm too frightened to be on my own. I'm too frightened to leave them. Again, you've got an attachment issue. You haven't got a relationship issue there. It's just pure attachment. That kind of makes sense. Once they in there. Any questions about yourself? Because that's where it gets most interesting when we talk about our soul. Anybody? Okay, so let's do a poll then. So how many of you think maybe you're anxious attached? Keep chasing. Keep chasing. Do you ever shut down? Pull away? How many of you think you're dismissive avoidant? So dismissive avoidant. I can't even be bothered to raise your hand and satisfy and reassure me. Dismissive avoidant. And how many of you think you might be secure? Good. Very good. And how many of you think you might be fearful avoidant? So you do crave connection, but you kind of shut down and pull away so as not to get hurt. Yeah, good. Good. And then how many of you kind of worked out what your partner is, or your past partners, from just what I've said? And how many of you noticed that you've gone for like the opposite version of you? So if you're fearful avoidant, you might actually go to another fearful avoidance. It's very dramatic. It's very passionate. If you are anxious attached, you tend to go for the dismissive avoidant. And then if you're extreme anxious attached, you might like the fearful avoidance. They tend to find each other as well. So why is that? Why? Sarah, go on.
Well, actually, I was going to ask that question. Is
Ah.
coming from your because your earlier bit where you're saying you marry who you're kind of, what was it? You're sorting out. So I'm just wondering.
You'll marry your unfinished business.
Yeah, because I was always wondering, because it's that classic combination, is it, with avoidant and the anxiously attached? But it always was like, why does that even make sense? Because you think, God, they're just surely triggering each other like terribly, but that's often the common way. But I'm just wondering, given that lens of like you're just trying to solve your wound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be literally as simple as that. Yeah. Think about it. This is kind of like a comedy way to think about it. So imagine that you're 2 years old and you're rattling the stairgate because, you know, mum's in the kitchen ignoring you. And you're sort of screaming blue murder because you want her to come back and regulate you. And then your sibling comes up and also starts rattling the stairgate. And like, what's that? Unlikely that you're then going to turn to each other and comfort each other. Do you see what I mean? It's like, you're just as needy as me. You've got no hope in hell of regulating me, you know, because you'd think, oh, they'd cling together, surely. No, because they've got nothing to offer. They're trying to get. They're trying to get regulation. So you can't get regulation from someone who's also dysregulated. So what I find is that anxious attached tend to find other anxious attached individuals quite repellent. So they find them needy and clingy. They're like, ooh. And what it does is, because again, we've got those scripts inside of us, it usually takes a dismissive, avoidant parent to create an anxiously attached child. So it's a marriage made in heaven when you grow up and you find someone, oh, look, they'll finally give me the love that I always craved. You know, they're so stoic and strong, you know, they've got what it takes to, you know, they're regulated. So I want them to regulate me, because dismissive avoidants look really regulated. They look really strong and stoic and like they could handle you. They just don't want to. They just don't want to handle you. But another anxious attached isn't going to cut it for you. Like, you being chased, no, I've got nothing to give you. I'm here to get. Like, I need you to regulate me. If it works, great. But avoidants don't tend to like other avoidants. For starters, no one's going to do the texting. Like, who's going to make the date? No one. So they don't care. So they're not bothered. You know, it's kind of like, you'd imagine those two on a date and they get to the end and they're like, do you want to say no? No, we don't. No, you're all right. But they might have a nice walk back to the bus stop together, you know, in a companionable silence. There's no fireworks. And this is another thing when I strongly recommend people don't go on dates, like romantic dates, to meet people, because you're looking for a spark. Fuck, you don't want a spark. You want to literally have that person interview for about 3 to 6 months as your friend to see if they could actually meet any of your emotional needs. The anxious attached, I'm speaking from experience, will move in within a week, think, oh my God, you're the one, I want to marry you, I think you're great, and then spend like another 10 years just trying to get out of the relationship because they're stuck in it, or they'll leave it when they find somebody else. Yeah, so why do they find each other? Because of the scripts. That's the blueprint. So my mum was dismissive avoidant. So like finding someone who is, you know, that kind of, I just wanted love from her. So naturally finding Nick, who's like dismissive avoidant energy, it's like, he'll give it to me. He's strong. He's present. He doesn't, you know, like he doesn't run as fast away from me until I'm really needy, and then then he runs. So that's why we tend to be attracted to those things. It's unfinished business. It's you've got the script for it. It feels familiar. And with Nick as well, because he's actually more fearful avoidant, but he's more dismissive, fearful avoidant. So he's so when we started, I did the love bomb thing, right? The anxious attached often will completely go all in. And because I'm nice, I am genuinely nice, I was just lovely to him. So I loved him as a friend, and then I loved him as a romantic partner. I just wanted to make him so happy, and I wanted to give him, I was Aladdin. I want to show you the world. Come on, magic carpet ride with me. And honestly, he found it completely suspicious and overwhelming. Because in his blueprint, women were nice to you, and because his mum was an alcoholic, women are nice to you until they've had a drink or two, and then they switch on you, and then they push the knife in. And so he was just waiting. Where's the other foot going to drop? Like, when's it going to happen? She's all very nice. I don't want to believe it. I don't want to believe it, because the moment I believe it, she's going to hurt me. She's going to hurt me. She's going to hurt me. So pulling away and rejecting me being nice provoked. So again, this is part of the self-fulfilling prophecy. He would actively and he objectively provoked me. There was no two ways about it. There would literally be things he would do that would just provoke and be mean and reject me. And eventually, because I'm anxious attached, the protest behaviour kicked in. And it was just like, why are you being such a knob? Like, why are you being such a dick? Like, one time, I'll tell you this, so you don't think I'm completely mad. He took my car to go and do something, and I went off with my sister, and I said, could you come and get me? Because she won't have time to drop me back. So could you come and get me from Wickham in my car? Is that all right at this time? He's like, yeah, sure. Anyway, I'm calling him to try and get hold of him. So my sister's got to go. She's left me sort of stranded. And I'm calling him saying, where are you? Leaving messages. Babe, it's like, where are you? Are you coming? I can't get hold of you. And when he finally turned up, he's like, oh, I was about to turn around and go home because I just couldn't deal with the way you were talking to me. I was like, you're in my car. Like, you're in my car, and you told me you come pick me up, and you didn't. And I wasn't using a big tone, but maybe I was getting a bit tony at the end. But the point is that it was so, you're pushing me to see how I react. And of course I failed the test because I did get angry with him. And then because it was in his blueprint, it was like, you see, you're really rageful, you're going to hurt me. I can see it. Look, you see, you're mean and nasty. And that's the toxic aspect of it, yeah? Because in a way, he was actually more relieved because he'd seen it. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, I knew it. I knew I was right. And that was more familiar, and therefore he could cope with that. He knew how to do that. And he could shut down at that point and then be convinced that, yeah, relationships are shit. So when I say I've been through it, I really mean it. I've not been a passenger on this train. I have been the train driver. So it is trying to work all of that out. When you realise what protest behaviour is, when you realise what your attachment style is, it is so helpful to see it really clearly. That's the biggest shift that happens when I work with a couple and I explain, okay, right, your anxious attack, your dismissive avoidant, you know how you're going to trigger each other. And they're like, oh, yeah, that makes so much sense. Any questions on, hang on a minute, I'll no, not time to do these ones. I'm going to signpost basic emotional needs, because this is the other thing that we do. Oh, before we do that, quick test. Fairy tales. So somebody mentioned Disney in the chat. Here we go. Let's think fairy tales. Name some fairy tale characters. Disney fairy tale characters. I might know.
White.
Oh, Snow White, yeah. Oh my God. What attachment style do you think she is? If you know the story, because obviously if you don't know the story, it won't
Dismissive avoidant, because she's looking after all the sort of, happy and grumpy and sneezy and everyone.
Yes. Was she did she go there by choice?
That bit I don't remember.
No, she didn't.
No, she didn't go there by choice. And I think from memory, severely anxious attached.
I would say, wasn't she anxious?
Yeah, she was sent away, making friends with anybody that came along. She didn't reject the abusive stepmother. Like, she was cast out
Of course.
for being beautiful. And who rescues Snow White in the end? Is it just
Prince Charming, or was that another Disney one?
Too many Prince Charming.
Oh, Cinderella.
The one I know really classic one is Cinderella. So Cinderella, Prince Charming. Yeah. So we think, okay, so this is a really good analogy. So Cinderella, lovely relationship with her dad before he leaves. But she'd lost her mum and become a little bit parentified, as did Belle from Beauty and the Beast as well, a bit parentified. So when her stepmother's there, she's actually feels like she's worthless. So Cinderella's big wound is that she's worthless, is that she's abandoned, she's going to be abandoned, and nobody cares about her. But she's not really had anybody to validate her. She's only really ever experienced being put down, for herself. And then along comes this fairy godmother who's like, oh, you can go to the ball and meet Prince Charming if you want. No, I can't. I'm a servant girl. Like, nobody else is going to want to dance with me. And she said, oh, but I can dress you up and make you look like a princess. And then you can go to the ball. Oh, in that case, dress me up. Right? So she dresses up in total fakery, this false self of a princess. Yeah. And so she goes to the ball, and of course, Prince Charming, how fast does he fall in love? Is it 3 to 6 months of slow dating? Or does he fall quite rapidly in love with an illusion? So he's proper anxious attached. Mum, dad, busy, never validated him. No, well, you want to fall in love? Piff, piff, piff. You don't need love in a relationship. Piff, piff, piff. You want duty and so on and so on. And we're far too busy to meet your emotional needs. And along comes Cinderella. Oh my God, she's the one. She's the one. Anxiously obsessed. And she's in her fakery. And what happens at midnight when he will eventually find out who she is? What does she do?
She runs
Runs
away.
away.
She runs away. Now, what attachment style does that sound like?
Fearful avoidant.
London, right? So, you don't find out who I am because you won't love me. If you know who I really am, you wouldn't love me. And then he, anxiously obsessed, chases her and chases her and chases her and will not give up. And he's only met her for 10 minutes. That's pretty standard drama for us to have been brought up on, isn't it? And there you go.
But they live happily ever after, right?
Right, I'm so gonna write the sitcom of like them in couples therapy years later. Yeah. Because they don't live happily ever after. They go to couples therapy and live happily ever after. That's what happens. Because ultimately, what happens when it's just the two of them, and he leaves his cup on the table, and she's like, "I'm not your fucking servant." And he's like, "Whoa, what is that coming from? Oh, I just need some space. God damn it, you're all over me." Be great. So yes, fly on the wall in that castle. But you can start to look at films now and realise that, oh my God, yeah, fearful avoidant, get close to being hurt, shut down, run away. Anyway, basic emotional needs. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I want to show you, because I know some of you have done this already. The basic emotional needs in a relationship is a massive part of it. You have to be meeting each other's emotional needs, or at least not threatening them. Now, the importance of this: certainty, love and belonging, and significance are our basic emotional needs. Everybody has the same needs. We meet them in different ways. But depending on your attachment style, depending on your blueprint, your thermostats are set differently. So you want to know, where are your thermostats? So I had 3 sisters. Significance was fairly hard to come by. So I would say my bucket for significance is bigger. I'm trying to collect more significance. There's a bloody hole in it, right? So I'm growing up trying desperately to be significant and matter when there's 3 other people competing for that role, for that same limited attention. And so as a grown-up, it's like, okay, well, how do I matter? Fight with whatever way you mattered as a child, just do that to the extreme as a grown-up. So whatever your thermostat is, you want to know what your partner's thermostat is for each of their needs. So, for example, certainty as a child was like, it wasn't great, but my parents came home, night after night, it was fairly predictable. So I never felt sort of massively unsafe. It was fairly predictable. There was always someone to play with. So if you said, were you loved? Yeah. But did I matter? No. Right. So that's going to be my top need in a relationship. That's going to be the hardest one to meet. So as an anxious attached, how does it make me feel significant? Because all the time I'm going to be like, oh, I don't matter then. So is that why you want to play golf? Because I don't matter. Like, that's the interpretation, is you need to do all these things to make me matter, otherwise I don't feel happy. I don't feel fulfilled. So figure out what your thermostat are by thinking about your childhood and like, how certain was I? Was certainty fairly easy to come by? Was love and belonging fairly easy to come by? And in what way? And significance, was that easy to come by? And in what way? What did I do to be significant? And the funniest thing I see is the anxious attached with the wound of I'm not good enough, trying really hard in relationships to list all the things that they're doing to make their partner feel good enough, even though their partner is like, that's not how it works for me. Like, I need something else. No, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing for you to make you feel good enough. And then getting cross because they're feeling rejected and not good enough in return, even though it's like they're not getting it, that no, that's not what your partner actually needs. Your partner needs you to leave them alone for them to feel safe. Whole different thing. So if you've got one partner that says, I need to be alone because that's when I feel safest, or I need you to be kind and quiet because that's when I feel safest, then that's what you have to do. But if you're feeling insignificant and you get loud when you get insignificant, you're naturally going to spark their dismissive avoidance. You're going to spark their fear. They're going to want to run away. So you end up with these dynamics, in these sort of push-pull dynamics based on your emotional needs. So the anxious attached chases, which then triggers the dismissive avoid to run, which then triggers the abandonment, which then triggers the protest behavior, which then triggers the dismissive avoid to run, and so on. And by stopping and saying, whoa, what am I trying to get from you? What am I actually trying to get from this? Then half the battle is, have I got a hole in this bucket? Like, would any amount of reassurance ever actually be enough? Or have I got therapy to deal with that? Because if you're inherently feeling worthless, no amount of your partner reassuring you probably do it. Maybe. But you might just distort it after a while. And this is the most toxic one, is where a partner will say, like, will treat you badly when you love them because they inherently feel worthless. So if you're treating me, if you're trying to get love from me or trying to love me, how worthless does that make you? Like, if I'm a piece of shit and you love me, you must be a bigger piece of shit than me. Right? So why would I love you? That's gross. I want to love the people that run away from me because they must be better than me. And if I can make them love me, then I'm good enough. Duh. That's easier to understand. So there's a lot of shit goes on. You need to pick apart. And one of them is your emotional needs and the thermostats that they're set at. And have you got any holes in them buckets that nobody could fill for you? And all that nonsense about, we shouldn't rely on our part to meet our emotional needs is bollocks. You are designed as a human being to co-regulate with another human being. It is absolutely okay that you meet each other's emotional needs. You just can't be the only source of it, because that's not fair. And it will be ultimately disappointing. So you do need to make sure that you are capable of receiving safety, love and belonging, significance from that person. You need to know that in what ways you need it to be done, and your partners, and then you mutually agree to meet the other person's needs, provided they're reasonable and doable. But they have to be in the way that the other person needs them to be. So common one here. You know, oh, if my husband dances with me, he must love me. So then I feel loved whenever he dances with me, or if he puts the bins out, or if he brings me flowers, and so on. So we've all got our own rules, cheat codes, if you will. You want to hand those cheat codes over to your partner, and it's very telling who'll use them and who won't use them. Yeah. If you give the cheat codes to somebody and they don't use them, that's often more hurtful, which is why people don't give them the cheat codes. They don't want to feel like, well, I gave you the cheat codes and you still didn't use them. You really must not love me. You see, there's layers of this stuff, but it starts when you communicate, you start filtering it out. It's so much easier to understand it. Just lay it out there. Right, let's do our attachment styles. Right, emotional needs next. What are yours? How do you meet yours? What do I do that makes you feel good about yourself? What do I do that makes you feel safe? What do I do that makes you feel loved? List them out for me. And then what do I do that makes you feel unloved? So that's another one, by the way. That's the anxious. Who spends time without me means he doesn't love me. That's obvious. I mean, how could they? How could they walk away from you? You would never spend time, you know, without them. Unmet emotional needs. So what does your partner do that meets and threatens your emotional needs? So when you do X, it makes me feel loved. When you do Y, it makes me feel safe. When you do Z, it makes me feel good about myself. When you do A, it makes me feel unsafe or insecure. When you do B, it makes me feel abandoned or abandoned. Even using the word abandoned means you probably need therapy on that. It's a very 0 to 3 word, but it makes me feel alone. And when you do C, I feel bad about myself. Like I feel like you don't value me. Yeah. And then you want to know, what do I do that meets and threatens your partner's needs? Because it's not going to be the same as yours. It's going to be completely different. Now, if you've got a dismissive avoidant, they'll be like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about all this shit? Like needs. I told you I loved you. Yeah, you told me you loved me 20 years ago when we got married. Yes. And I didn't lie. Therefore, I must still love you. Like, yeah, but I need to hear it. Oh, for God's sake. Right? So needy. The point is, if you don't work on a relationship with somebody, or if somebody's not willing to work on a relationship with you, then you do not have a relationship with that person. You have a situationship that was static and years ago, because everybody's growing all the time. You're learning, you're developing, you're growing, your lives are changing. If your relationship isn't treated like a third person who you both are responsible to look after, you don't have a relationship. You are two individuals coexisting in parallel. So the relationship is a third entity that you both have to feed, that you both have to look after like its own thing. And you don't have to work at it. That's, the fallacy there. But if there's something, if your needs aren't met, then that's a problem that both of you have. Yeah. If one person has a problem in the relationship, you both have a problem in the relationship. However annoying or inconvenient that might be, it is true that it is you against the problem, or you fixing the problem. It is not the other person's issue to just stop being needy and get over it, or stop being a dick. It's not. It's both of you have that problem. And if you don't have that person, that is the biggest problem when somebody won't work on the relationship with you. There's a lot you can do by yourself. Like I said, if you do the individual work on your own triggers, what happens is you start to see that person in a very different light, and you start to be able to see what's going on for them and what you might actually be able to do to connect better with them. So when I was connecting with Nick through the eyes of my anxious attachment style, it was like, God, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to meet my needs? What's wrong with you? Why are you being so horrible to me? When I dealt with my stuff, it was like, what's making you so frightened? Like, what's making you feel like you want to run? Like, and then asking more questions, and trying to make it safe for him. All right, let me just see what we've got going. All right. I'm not going to go through the trigger response loop, but I think you can probably imagine what that is. But in the couples course, or with the therapy, it's really important that you go through with the couple what the process is, like what the strategy is. So let's say on an average week, the partner says, right, I'm going to go and play golf with the boys on Sunday. The anxious attached goes, ugh. Oh no, that's triggered me. That's triggered my abandonment wound. He doesn't love me, sends them into a spin. What do they do next? What's their response to that? And then you list that out, what's the response? And then you go back to the partner and say, right, when they do that, what is your response to that? What does that trigger in you? When you write that down, and how do you respond to it? And then how does your response trigger your partner again? And then you end up in this big cycle. Yeah, so I make a flippant comment about like, oh, so you don't want to spend Sunday with me then? Now, dismissive avoidance, take everything as an attack. So, because remember, nothing I do is ever good enough. So saying something like, oh, so you don't want to spend any time with me then? Oh, for God's sake, here we go again. Oh, you look, see, you don't want to be with me, do you? Because the moment I mention anything, I'm just a big problem to you. Right? And you go round and round. Some of you are laughing because I think this is familiar. Right? But you trigger them and they trigger you, and then you can't get out of the loop. So writing the loop down and saying, oh, look, this is the script that we're using. Super, super helpful, because then you can kind of go, okay. We can look at meanings. We can look at resolving the triggers. Let me go, blah, blah, blah. There we go. And then we kind of get it into a kind of loop. And then there's individual breakthroughs to have. What have we got time for? Let's have a look. Well, here's a good one. Who's done prime concerns at Master Prac? Yeah. So here's a really good one to ask couples. Ask them to remember a blissful memory from their relationship. If you can't get blissful, fine, happy is fine. But the best memory from the relationship. Or a past relationship if they're trying to work out a past one. But just like the best memory when they were in that relationship. And then you ask them those ecstatic state questions. So what was present in that moment that's usually absent? And what's absent in that moment that's normally present in everyday life? And that will usually give you your relationship prime concern. What is it you are trying to get out of this relationship, or did once, but then feel like is taken away from you, or kind of dangled occasionally and not given to you? So what was the big high that you got from the relationship that you don't feel every day now? So that'll give you an idea of what your emotional needs are in the relationship, but also your prime concern. So is it to be, the most common one for dismissive avoidant is to be accepted. That's all they want. They just want to be accepted, often left alone, not attacked, not complained about, not criticized, just to be accepted as they are. And for the anxious, obviously there's more like to be loved. I just want to feel like I matter. But yeah, or I'm good enough. That I'm good enough. Or that I'm wanted. That's another one. So if you know what your prime concern is, again, cheat code. Fastest way to make Nick happy is to say I accept you. And fastest way for him to make me happy is to say, and I still want you. Right? I still accept you, I still want you. Rather than I love you or whatever, is tell them what they need to hear. Then you might have more than one, obviously. All right. So conflict styles. Who's heard of conflict styles? Yeah. Thank you. So you need a 5-to-1 ratio of positive experiences to negative experiences, and that's backed up by the Gottman's research from the Love Lab, because you need a 5 to 1. Now we know that from stacking and anchoring, right? We know that if you have a really positive feeling for someone and stack a load of negatives on top of it, you're going to diminish the positive feeling eventually. So what really they're talking about with the 5 to 1 ratio is you need to keep stacking the positives back over the negatives. The best way to do that is with repair. So you can have massive bust ups as long as you come back and repair satisfactorily to both partners. The repair is the thing that most people don't do, and families, you know, Gen X, Gen X generation, there was no repair, there's no sorry, there's no, you know, that was just not done then, not the done thing. So conflict styles, ultimately, I won't go into massive depth right now, but there is no, most of the time when you're working with a couple, it's the container that's the problem, not the issues in it. So one of them might be really messy, one of them might be really tidy. They annoy the shit out of each other. But the way they handle that conflict is more important than the incompatibility. Because no two people can be completely compatible, like in all sort of every area. And if it was, they might be a bit bored. So it's nice that we have differences. It's good that we have differences and arguments, because you're going to have to, you know, bustle along, you know, with each other for a lifetime. So it's really important that you learn how to fight with each other and how to have conflict and how to resolve that conflict without it triggering your attachment styles, without it triggering your emotional needs, and without avoiding it altogether. So the worst thing you can do is not talk about it and just avoid the conflict and just suck it up. Sometimes it's good. Like, you know, certain times of the month, Nick's like, I'm just going to let that slide. I'm just going to let that slide because I have a really, you know, good survival instinct. That's a time to avoid the conflict is fine. But if it's no, actually this matters to me, I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to bring it up, then the way you bring it up is really important. And there's ways to have a good conflict. Quite often you'll see it's the incompatible conflict styles that are the problem. So if two people are very reasonable, and I do love a couples session where there's two very reasonable people talking in front of me, that's really nice and easy. And they listen and they listen and accept what the other person's saying, and they might go back and forth. That's easy. And if there's too volatile, which is, I thought I told you to take the bins out. Well, I would have done if you weren't such a, you know, a harpy. You know, if you have two people that are both equally used to the same like way of talking to each other, maybe they grew up in a house of lawyers or something, then they don't mind. Yeah, happy to shout, happy to raise their voices. It will look dramatic to everybody else, but they're having a great time. Not a problem. And if there's two avoidants who are like, we're just not going to talk about it, okay? Yeah, no, that's brilliant. No, that works for me. Fabulous. And it's not going to come up and bite us in the arse. No, it's fine, because I'll avoid it then as well. It's fine. Brilliant, perfect, you know, happy marriage. But if there's one who's avoidant and one who's volatile, that's the person who's going to just follow you room to room until you have the fight with them. And that's going to be very upsetting and toxic and not helpful. And also someone who's moved into hostile, where they're exhibiting some of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as the Gottmans call them, where they're just really damaging behaviors. So again, occasionally it tipping into hostile is fine if you get a repair because you got heated. If it's just your way now and you hate each other and you're just the enemy, that's you're on your way out at that point. The eventuality of divorce is really high in those couples where it's got to that level. So these are the horsemen to look out for. It is not a good idea to criticize your partner. And by criticizing, I mean the always. So, babes, you know, you said you take the bins out and they're still there. Could you do them before we go to bed? That's a complaint. That's a one time issue that I've got an issue with, that I'm bringing to your attention in the way that I'm bringing it to you. If I say, what is wrong with you? Why do you never listen? Why do you never do things the first time? Jesus, are you so lazy that you just can't do it the first time? What's wrong with you? Now, any of that is a criticism because I'm attacking the person and the character. And that's not fair. And what are you going to get if you criticize somebody? How will they respond? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Oh, sorry, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the bin said there. I'll do it the right way. Sorry. Or are you going to get defensiveness? Yeah. I was going to do the bloody bins. You don't have to have a go at me. I always do the bins. Why are you so horrible? Right? You're going to get defensive. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. Stop attacking me. So if you don't want somebody to be defensive, don't criticize them. You can use a complaint instead, which is brought to them in a particular way that actually is likely to get a resolution and not just you venting. It is not okay to stonewall. You don't have a relationship with someone if they're stonewalling you. You have a fearful avoidant who doesn't want to talk about it and is terrified. It's their only way of maintaining power because they probably can't argue with you. They're either scared they're going to lose their shit and you'll leave them, or they'll lose their shit and leave. And it's just the only safe thing for them to do is shut down and not talk about it. Contempt. So this is name calling, just being obnoxious to each other, like really horrid. That again is the biggest predictor of divorce, is when they're contemptible, and they have contempt for each other, or one partner has contempt for the other one. And I've sat there and in with couples where maybe in the individual session they're like, he's just a twat. Like, he's actually just a twat. Like, they've got nothing good to say about them. It's like, okay, fine, okay, that's contempt. That's a really bad sign. And their partner is saying mean things about them, and it's just, it's you're the enemy at that point, and you need to address that first. None of the other shit's going to matter if you don't address the fact they hate each other. And they don't really hate each other. They hate the fact that that person's hurt them for a really long time and maybe won't listen and maybe won't change. And you just feel exhausted to the point where you're just now like, I need you to back off and get away from me, because their needs are on the floor. So it's, again, not their fault. That's just where they've got to. Cool. All right, so this. Right, so this is all the stuff. Emotional intimacy, yes, very good. We all want more of that. Polarity. Anybody got any funny rules for relationships? So what I often get is it all right if my partner wants to have female friends? So if you've got a boyfriend and it's like they insist on having loads of female friends that they see by themselves, I often get that as a big question. Is that all right? Is that all right that he has lots of female friends that he sees by himself? How many of you, show of hands, let's vote him in or out. How many of you'd be fine with your boyfriend or partner or husband having lots of female friends that they see on their own? Yeah. Now, the important thing to remember here is there's no right answer to that question. Yeah, there's no somebody who sits in judgment of people and says, no, that is not okay. You can have whatever rules for your relationship that you want. So if you said you must wear a colander on your head and slap me with a wooden spoon on a Sunday, and that's your rule for relationships, otherwise you won't feel loved, that's your rule. What you've got to do is find somebody who's into it. Right? That's the trick. You can have any rules for your relationship that you like. So if you don't want your partner to have friends that they see by themselves, because for you that's just not something that you feel comfortable with, you don't need necessarily to have therapy for that so that you can get okay with it. You can say, for me, the values in my relationship are that we are each other's person, and if they want female friendships, we can both be friends with them. That is fine. Yeah, we can both be friends with each other's opposite gender friends, let's say, if that's how you want to work it. The important thing to do is have that conversation very early on in your relationship and not just think you'll be fine with it. Because those are the things that will go round and round and round as bones of contention for years if you don't get on it at the beginning. Now, I'm a big advocate that if you can have whatever rules you want, but you need to talk about these things before you commit to each other. And things that you probably won't even know that will come up like that, right? But the Gottmans say that in the first 30 days, your partner's shown you who they are. In the first 30 days of dating, being with them in a relationship, they've shown you who they are. They've shown you all the red flags that you're going to see, but you may have ignored them. Yeah. Or they felt exciting and familiar because they're part of your blueprint. Or you excused them because of the other feelings that you got, but they've shown you who they are. It was subtle, but they showed you. They've also probably given you an idea of the kinds of conflicts you may never resolve as well. Like there may be, obviously I'm from an NLP background. There's nothing you can't resolve really. Because even the, do you want children argument, it's like, don't marry somebody who doesn't want children if you want children. That's just, why would you do that to yourself? But also, I will say this to men, don't go out with a woman who's over the age of 35 if you don't want children. Fuck off out of her life. What are you doing? Don't be a dick. Like, I'm also very sort of severe about that, because why should she grieve something that, is flippant to you? Like, why make her have to choose? So, because she doesn't know how much grieving she's going to have to do for you if you decide you don't want children, whatever. So these are the conversations you need to bloody have. And if you want somebody to smack you on the arse with a metal spoon wearing a colander on their head, you probably want to tell them up front that that's on the cards. Give them the opportunity to say, can it be a sieve? Will that still do it? Can I use a wooden spoon? And maybe have a compromise before you commit to each other and end up in front of me trying to have that debate. Okay. Anybody who's ever seen like 50 Shades of Grey, like, oh, watch that back now you know about attachment styles, man. Like there's dramatizing and romancing somebody who's utterly broken, and like talk about fearful, avoidant, manipulative, controlling, narcissistic. I mean, but he has funny, yay! And the only reason she can cope with it is because she has a fairly secure attachment. But she doesn't have to cope with it. She likes the drama. She likes the excitement. So anyway, fun to watch some films back and see how you've been indoctrinated all these years to think that the drama is what we should be aiming for. And if you have a little boring relationship, that your partner just shows up on time and is nice and cares about you and brings you flowers. Oh, why are you so dull? Why is there no passion? Why is there no excitement? Because he's not a dick. Yeah, that's why. Because he's nice. So there's ways to get the passion though. If you want the drama and you want the passion, there's ways to get it. You need to have a conversation. But often what happens is you have to go back to your attraction strategy. You have to remember what was attractive about them at the beginning. Remember strategies from Masterpack. Remember what was attractive about them at the beginning, and then re-trigger that strategy. Because the chances are is that as you've got to know each other, the novelty and the newness and the fear, the uncertainty wears off because you now know them. They are more certain, and there's more love there. And you've gone into your love strategy, which is all about deeper connections, more reliability, more safe, where you can kind of almost take each other for granted. And then, because what happens to the attractions, the complete antithesis of your deep love strategy. But if you know what your attraction strategy is, you can trigger it off at will. Yeah, get the colander, get the metal spoon. There we go. That does it for you. Then you know. But if over time you just forget to do those things, so Esther Perel's a good one for talking about polarity. She's good at talking for women anyway. Really good at talking about recovering after infidelity. The Gottmans talk about recovering after infidelity. It's doable, but people need to understand about trust. And that's what I was saying at the beginning, that trust is not faith. Like if you start off a relationship and say, well, I have faith that they won't cheat on me, that's basically what you mean. I have nothing to go on that would give me the indication of whether this person would do that or not. As you get to know somebody and you start to listen to their inner world and listen to their experiences, you start to get the sense of whether that person would do that, is capable of it or not, and whether they would bring you the issue before they went outside of the relationship. Yeah, those that's what you could trust. So when I got to know Nick, one of the things I remember him saying was how he felt infidelity was like the worst thing ever, and that any of his friends that had ever done it, he would say, like, I just lost all respect for them, because you can't do that to another person, it's just so mean. And that's a really good indication that someone has the values that you could trust, that they wouldn't do it to you. So if you're going out with someone and they did it to a partner but they justified it, well, what did you learn from it though? Did you learn that wasn't a good idea? That it didn't help anything? And that ultimately you just ruined the relationship for, because you didn't want to talk about it? What? So infidelity is a symptom. It's not the problem within itself, because lots of couples have issues of trust. For example, dismissive avoidance, where they just don't tell you what they did because they don't want to have the argument. That's a trust issue. Don't start lying in your relationship to get away with things and avoid arguments, because you're ruining, your chance of having a positive relationship. You don't have to totally tell everybody everything, but lying by omission still counts. So, just saying, oh, you didn't ask me, is not really good enough. If you wouldn't want your partner to match that energy with you, don't use it. Don't use that energy yourself. Where do we go from here? Okay, so tons more I could talk about. It's already 1:15. You've got lives to lead, places to go, people to see, spoons to smack on people's bums. You've got stuff to do. So I'm obsessed now with I've got this vivid picture in my head, as probably have all of you now. I don't know who you're visualizing with the colander, but that's a tale in itself. I imagine. Who's wearing the colander? Fun afternoon ahead. So I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. I've probably gone to the delirium here. Where do we go from here? Okay, so if you haven't already got the NLP to Thrive, that was the name that I've settled on. Those of you that don't like it, I've settled on it. And Manifestor, don't tell me what to do. I'll send out the link in the recording for the app. The web app's the only one we've got available at the moment, but you can go on there and have a look. And a lot of the stuff on there is great. You can start using it now. You can download the app from Passion. It's just not launched on its own yet. That's coming, and I'll let you know when that happens. But there's loads of free resources on the app. Remember, I talked about the dynamic diagnosis session. So if you're really interested in having a deep dive with your partner, I'll just explain what that is. There's it's a 10-week course, not a 12-week course, the Recreating Relationships. 12-week just feels like forever, doesn't it? Like committing to 3 months. Those of you that are commitment babes, like 12 weeks, that's like half a life. So it's only 10, makes it a little bit better. And there's a Healing Your Blueprint course, which I'm going to do like as an intensive for a smaller number of people, where they just want to work on their own stuff rather than like learning about all the relationship stuff and working through the partner and so on. All right, so dynamic diagnosis sessions. Okay, so slowest slides in history. Come on, I'm busy. Right, there we go. £349, and you get a 45-minute discovery session each. Even if you've already had a 45-minute session with me before for another thing, you and your partner each get a brand new one to talk about your relationship. A 2-hour deep dive into your dynamic. So this could be if you've got a partner or not, obviously. This if you just want to learn your blueprint yourself. We have a 2-hour deep dive into your dynamic, and then I give you a report explaining all about what we just kind of covered. So your attachment style, conflict styles, your emotional needs, everything we kind of pull out as to what's maybe gone wrong in past relationships if you're an individual doing it, and what you need to work on, basically. So what would help you to have a cleaner blueprint. And then I'll kind of signpost what you would need to do if you want to do it by yourself, or if you wanted to have coaching, I would probably indicate what we would need to do as coaching. So you basically get 3.5 hours for £349. And even I think that on its own, not only is it one of my favourite things to do, because that's what me and Nick needed. Like, we could do the work ourselves, but we just needed somebody to come in and say, right, you're this, you're that, that's what's happening, that's why this is happening, and here's what to do about it. And it would have been like, oh, okay, I didn't know about protest behaviour, I didn't know about that, okay. So that's one option. And then, they're going to do it automatically. I'm such a control freak that when I finally actually give somebody else work to do for me, I then freak out because I don't actually know what they've done. So my slide's not changing at the moment. It should move on. If not, I'll just, there we go, it's coming. All right, there's some discount codes that you need to take note of. So 10-week course online, everything that we've covered today is one week each thing. So you get to go through your own attachment styles, you get to go through your own needs, all the exercises, we get to do all of the questions, all of the exercises, everything in, the examples, so you really understand it. We pull out your response, trigger response loop. We do the relabeling. This could be for your relationship with anybody. So bosses, family, partner, anybody, your whole relationship blueprint. The 10-week course, 2 hours a week, starting on 3rd of May. So I think it's the Saturday morning, 10:30 to 12:30. That's the next one coming up. If you want to do it by yourself, it's £475, or it's £850 for a couple. However, I wouldn't do that to you. You know there's a discount coming. And the code is, and I'll put these links in the chat. If you want to do, there we go. I am going to make doing it as a 2, so whether it's a best mate or as a couple, I am going to make doing it as a 2 cheaper than doing it as a 1. So here is, okay, I'm just going to put the link up. All right, okay.
Jess, is it an online course with others? So it's not just you two on the online course, it's like a group like this?
Yeah, like this.
Yeah.
This is more kind of like, let's all go through it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like a group coaching, although there will be coaching involved, but it's more of a course and learn everything that you need to know, so you can do it by yourself, working along through each week. And okay, does that answer the question?
Yeah.
All right. So if you want to do 10-week course, that's the one down there. So it says book the 10-week course. I need to go through and tidy this up. Sorry, I did this at last night. If you want to do the 10-week course and you want to do it as a 2 and you want to do it cheaper than for a 1, so basically better than a buy one get one free, then use the code LOVEPAYS 2025. Pays to do it with a friend. So just to give you the idea of that, so if you have a partner and they want to do it, you can do the live sessions, they can watch the recordings, and your mate can do the live sessions with you as your +1, and their partner can watch the recordings. You just can't interchange. So that's 4 of you for the price of £425. Yeah. Thanks, Rosie. So if you want to do the 10-week course with me, it's £425 if you use Love Pays and you go for the 2 people. Yeah. Which ultimately accounts like 4 people, but it's 2 people on the live call. Yeah. So you can find a friend to share that with. And then If you want to do the dynamic diagnosis as well, which is so good if you do it before the course, so you've got until the 3rd of May, if you booked in that 2:45 and a 2-hour session with your partner, yeah, that was £349. But if you buy it as a bundle with the course, let me put that on there. There's the link there, and use the code LOVEWINS 2025, then you're going to get an extra 50 quid off as well. So you're going to get the dynamic diagnosis for 300, and then 2 of you doing the course for 425 total. So it comes out at about 725 for the whole lot. And you can't sniff fairer than that, I reckon.
Jess, sorry, does the friend get the dynamic diagnosis as well for that?
Well, they'd have to do it with you.
Oh, right. So you're doing it with the friend rather than. So if I wanted to get my friend to do it,
you could do.
Yeah,
So
okay.
here's how it would work. You would get the dynamic diagnosis for £300, let's say, and you
Yeah.
do that with your partner. But your
Yeah.
other person, your best mate, could come to the course, and you just split the price of the course £425 with her, let's say.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
So you'd have paid 725 in total, but you'd have got 300 discount for your dynamic thingy diagnosis, and then you split the course part of 425 with her.
Yeah. Got it. And when is the course? Sorry, what
3rd of
time,
May.
dates?
3rd of May for 10 weeks, 10:30 to 12:30, and it's recorded.
Is it always on Saturdays, Jess?
Sorry, yeah. At the moment it is, yeah. If we get everybody, if it fills up, then obviously I'll start another one. Like, I'll start a waiting list and see when is another good time to do it. But yeah, at the moment, Saturdays is the only day. Like, guarantee. It seems to be the more popular to do the group coaching in the past, anyway. Evenings, people are always so tired, or they've got stuff on. So, and that's what we're gonna. Oh, sorry, what was the question?
I was just going to say I'm a bit confused. So just to clarify, so we've got the dynamic diagnosis, which is just you and your partner. That's £349. Then we've got the recreating the relationships, the 10-week course.
Yeah.
And you can either do that individually for 475, or you can do it as a couple for 850. But if you use the code, then you could sign up for the 475, and your friend would also sign up.
No,
sorry.
No, so it's literally. So I thought this might be confusing. Right. So yes, if you sign up for the 10-week course, go for the couples option, but use the Love Pays discount code, and you'll get it for cheaper than it would be for one person. So you'll get 2 people for £425 total, which is about 200.
Oh, okay. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Because obviously, if you want to do it with your partner, great, and you both want to show up, then pay £425 for a couple with the discount thing, and both show up. But if you're like, what a budget, dude, then split it with a friend. He can watch the recordings, and your busy mate can give you half that money, £212.50.
I'm with you.
Their partner can watch the recordings. So I'm trying to kind of make it as easily accessible as possible for everybody, regardless of budget and so on. And then, yeah, if you want the diagnosis as well, then there's the bundle, which is have that and the course, and then you get another £50 off the diagnosis as well. So the diagnosis on its own, I think, is just like to have somebody just pull out of you what is going on in your relationship is super helpful. Just to have it there. I love doing that. And then, yeah, the course itself is such a nice opportunity to go through, because you can say I'm going to do the course first with my partner, like in my mind, and then I'm going to go back and listen to all the videos again, and the live session recordings, and I'm going to do it on my relationship with money and pretend that money is the person that I'm in this relationship with and do it all again. So it's kind of the gift that keeps on giving there. Yes. Cool. Any questions on the content or the healing your blueprint? No dates for that at the moment. I'm going to sort of take a temperature check of who's interested in doing this, because it's smaller numbers, so it's going to be much more sort of small group working through your stuff together. So group coaching, step by step, healing attachment style, and your triggers, and your past relationships as well.
Jess, how's that different to the course?
Yeah, so on the course, I might, I'll talk about attachment styles, and I'll talk about prime concerns, and I'll talk about the triggers, and we'll pull all of those out. On the Healing the Blueprint, we might not necessarily need to go through sort of a lot of the theory, if that makes sense. So, because I want the course to be for you as coaches as well, to kind of go, right, I want to learn everything I need to learn to be able to coach somebody through this stuff. So I need to remember all the prime concern questions. I need to go through the soft startup method. I need to go through the event state, meaning behavior, way of speaking, and the conflict resolution and everything else. It's going to be less about skill build in the Healing the Blueprint. It's more going to be about healing your attachment style, your anxiety, how you're triggered in relationships, rather than just all about what you need to know, forever on your relationship. I would say that you could probably do, because not everybody has like the big wounds, they just don't know how to resolve conflict or talk to each other. There's varying different things. If you know you've got issues with your attachment style, more likely going to be full of anxious attached and fearful avoidance, because dismissive avoidance don't think they've got problems very often, unless they realize they have. Yeah, because often it's that when you're in the anxious person, if you're in the anxious attachment style, you're experiencing more pain in the relationship because you're not getting your needs met from the other person, and you always have to go at the pace of the avoidant, because you can't get blood out of a stone. If somebody's not giving you what you need, they're not giving it to you. So the anxious is always the one trying to get more, trying to do more and chase and trying to figure things out, and not so much the avoidant. Yes, Scarlett.
Jess, what book would you recommend to learn more about the attachment styles? Because whilst I can quite easily see me, I can't necessarily see Tom. So what would be the best book?
Okay, so I'm doing my own attachment style quiz, so that's also helpful, but there's loads available now anyway. The other thing is Attached. So just literally that's the title. It's called Attached. Secure Love by, was it Julianne Manano? That's good. And Securely Attached, I think, is the other title. I'll put those links in the thing. And honestly, anything by the Gottmans. Anyway, anything they're in. Fight Right's brilliant, really good. Man's Guide to Women. Just buy that for every man you know. They don't really do. They put a lot of emphasis on skill building and understanding, and not so much on do the fucking work.
Okay.
I'm very much do the work.
Yeah.
Like do the individual shit, because you get so much of a bigger shit that way.
Okay. And who was the first one by? Sorry, you said Attached.
Well, Attached, I can't remember now. Hold on, let's have a look. Probably a few. Okay. It is Amir Levine. Really good, that one. I've always yeah.
Yes, what was that? The book Man Saying No to Women, was it called?
Man's Guide to Women by John Gottman. It's hilarious. I loved it. It's an easy read. He's very funny. Really good. And they do things like I loved their raising an emotionally intelligent child, and the emotional coaching. That's been really helpful. Anything they do, read it. It's brilliant. And on the audio books, I love it. Because they've done the research, so everything they're telling you is research back, and it's from a jumping off point. That is ultimately what you want, is to know that's been backed by 30 to 40 years of research from them, and then you've got your skills, obviously, as as coaches, to then okay, how do I use that? You know, how do I implement that? And all I've done is I've kind of mapped it all out because I'm used to taking people through the process. So you're capable of doing all the work. You just sometimes might need help pulling out what needs to be done in what order, kind of thing. So yeah, all I need to do with some of you is signpost, and that's it. Like do that, and then.
Thanks, Jess.
You're welcome. Any questions, Sarah? Have you still got questions?
Yeah, just a quick one. So I can't remember because we've done a little bit of work on this, I think. But if you've got 2 blueprints, does that translate sometimes into the fearful, or is it just not really? How does that relate to the dominant attachment style? Or
Yes. So most of the time, the biggest problematic one will be with mum, because that's your 0 to 3. Your if you have really big issues in certain relationships, it's probably because you've got someone whose attachment style is more like your mum's one. And if that was problematic, then it's going to be really painful. But it's also, those big loves of our life tend to be the unfinished business, the person whose love we craved more when we were little. And depending on when that was, it will be more and more painful if it was earlier. So if it was mum, because we don't really, I mean, dads are important, but we don't really worry where dad is when we're 1 year old if mum's got us. It's nice, he's funny, but we don't care if he doesn't turn up to feed us. We care if mum, feeds us. So those are the earlier, bigger, more dramatic attachment style issues found in that 0 to 3. But you will have the attachment style of how to attach to a parent who is your other parent, and therefore you might find that those relationships still have problems, but they might not be as dramatic as the attachment style with your mum. So it depends on how bad that was. If you had a really amazing attachment with mum but shit one with dad, then obviously the relationships that remind you of dad, you might be compelled to keep doing because he's the one you crave more love from. Yeah, kind of I want to feel like I can have his love. Yeah. So I think it really depends, but I've definitely been in relationships where I've been the avoidant, right? And they've been anxious attached, and I've been like, ugh, God, I just need some space to be on my own. Why are you so needy? And then, yeah, but they've never been the big loves of my life. The big loves of my life have always been the big, dramatic, emotional ones have always been mum's attachment style that they've exhibited. Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully that gives you some sense. But and I think it's the most wonderful way to do work on yourself. I don't think we should sort of avoid these big dramatic relationships. I know that I say red flags and you should the trauma that is the excitement and everything, but I also know that I'm a very different person having gone through the process. That I could have just said, oh no, I'll find somebody secure, but that would have made 0 growth for me and 0 healing. So I think if you're in one or you've got the attachment, lean into those relationships and work through them, because that's the only way you'll know if you're actually healed. Yeah. But avoid the really, really toxic ones, obviously, until you're a little bit more healed. My advice. Amanda, what was your question?
I was just wondering how much you were setting the blueprint price at. I missed it if you said it.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So, do you mean the 10-week course?
No, the Healing Your Relationship Blueprint.
Haven't thought about it. That one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it really because it would be by application, because I'll do it with a particular group of people, I think, and we'll just, because I'd want it to be really lovely and a really safe environment. So probably in a similar arena, I would imagine. I wouldn't be like wildly different. I wouldn't have thought. So similar ballpark.
Thank you.
Jess, just one more from me. The 10-week course, does someone need to have a basic understanding of NLP to join that? Okay, I've got someone in mind. I'm gonna tap up to see if they want to share. So I think we'll love it, and you will love her. She's such a babe.
Oh, brilliant. Bless you. Yeah, it'd be lovely. I think it'd be, because again, I think to do it with a mate is, yeah, as well as your partner. But I think
Yeah,
sometimes
he can do the
always,
recording.
there's always one partner that's like more keen, I think, than the other
Yeah.
person. So, and I think sometimes, yeah, you hold back a little bit when the other person's on the call. So, yeah,
There's no way I'm locking him down to every Saturday for 10 weeks, 10:30 till 12:30. It's not happening.
No, and I wouldn't expect anybody to be locked in every Saturday. There will be some that you think when you see the title, you think, oh, no, I'll do the recording of that, and that's totally legit, completely legit. I get it because it's Saturday, so I will be here, and then you can send your questions in ahead of time or after if you've watched the video. So no, I don't expect everybody to turn up to everyone religiously. So yeah, that's fine. Cool. Awesome. Well, that was a whistle stop tour. Let me just thank you everybody for coming. I'm just going to stop the recording. Thank you. Those people listening back on the recording.
There's another brilliant